Type 1 in the comments if The Sound of Music is one of your favorite films, or 0 if you're hearing this story for the first time. Because today we reveal the untold truth Julie Andrews has been carrying for nearly 60 years. Dame Julie Andrews has finally broken her silence at the age of 89. And what she just shared about a scene in The Sound of Music, one we were never supposed to know about, has left fans stunned. Why was this moment banned from discussion for decades, and what really happened behind the scenes? Let's dive right in. Julie Andrews' Untold Story. Released in 1965, The Sound of Music wasn't just a film. It was a global phenomenon, winning 5 Academy Awards, enchanting generations, and turning Julie Andrews into a household name overnight. Set against the backdrop of pre-war Austria, the film's message of hope music and resilience resonated deeply in a post-war world. Julie's portrayal of Maria the free-spirited governess was filled with heart humor and undeniable warmth. But while fans remember the rolling hills and joyful songs, few realize that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Something happened while filming in 1965, causing the entire group to break down. It was not a fatality or an accident. It was a noise, a silly childish noise that spoiled take after take of the film's most critical sequence. The studio spent thousands of dollars attempting to correct it. They couldn't, so they hid it instead. For 30 years, no one was allowed to discuss what actually occurred in that gazebo. Even Christopher Plummer, who despised the movie, maintained the secret. Until Julie Andrews eventually revealed everything on live television. This enormous chopper has a cameraman bravely fastened to the side near the entrance. In 1956, a German producer made 2 films based on Maria von Trapp's memoirs. They were massively popular in West Germany. In fact, they were the most widely distributed post-war pictures in Europe and South America. But in America, studios dismissed them as amateur hour. Then, something unusual occurred. Paramount enlisted Tony-winning director Vincent J. Dunhue to review possible projects. When he viewed the films, he thought they were awkward. But something in the narrative moved him deeply. So, rather than proposing it as a film, he said something audacious. "You can't make this into a film. You must convert it into a Broadway musical for Mary Martin." That concept altered everything. Maria von Trapp had already sold the picture rights years before for a mere $9,000. That is equivalent to around $104,000 in today's money. At the time, it did not appear to be much, and it was not. Hollywood had attempted to acquire only the title, but Maria declined. She emphasized that if someone was going to relate her story, they should tell the full thing. In the late 1950s, Mary Martin and her husband Richard Halliday attempted to contact Maria regarding the theater rights but were unable to locate her. She was out conducting missionary work in Papua New Guinea with Father Wasner. Every time they arrived at a new mission location, they discovered letters from a couple in America. Maria ripped them up. She was not interested in Broadway. She was determined to serve others. Then, fate stepped in. When Maria and Wasner returned to the United States via ship, they arrived in San Francisco. Richard Halliday was waiting. He offered out tickets to watch Mary Martin in Annie, Get Your Gun. Maria was impressed by the show, but she had to deliver some terrible news. She had already sold the rights to the Germans. Still, she reminded them they were welcome to give it their best effort. That shot would quickly become famous. Originally, the musical was intended to use authentic Austrian folk tunes with just a few new songs added by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein. However, when requested to create only one song, they refused. Their Broadway approach wouldn't work with traditional European songs. They offered the producers an ultimatum. "Let us compose the complete score, or we'll be out." The producers decided to wait until they finished Flower Drum Song. The patience paid off. The musical premiered on Broadway on November 16, 1959, and starred Mary Martin and Theodore Backel. It cost $400,000 to make by advance ticket sales totaled a staggering $232 million. The musical ran for 443 performances. Mary Martin only missed one concert throughout her whole run. Only months later, in June 1960, the picture rights ignited a bidding war. 20th Century Fox won and paid $1.25 million. That's more than $13 million today. The studio was suffering financially as a result of the Cleopatra debacle. This was a tremendous risk, but the transaction included an unusual condition. If the picture grossed more than $12.5 million, the authors would receive 10% of the revenues. Howard Lindsay considered it a joke. What image has ever been more successful? He was going to find out. Casting Maria von Trapp in the film version created its own drama. Julie Andrews was devastated after being rejected for the role of Eliza in My Fair Lady. They chose Audrey Hepburn instead. Hollywood saw Andrews as too bland for the film, but director Robert Wise recognized something in her. He approached the author after seeing incomplete Mary Poppins footage at Disney. Let's sign her before anybody else does. Andrews signed on for $225,000, which is equivalent to approximately $2.28 million today. There are no royalties or box office percentages, only a flat price. Meanwhile, Mary Martin made more than $8 million off the theatrical version. Fox would subsequently regret not giving Andrews a share of the profit. Her triumph for Mary Poppins was a sweet retribution. During her Oscar speech, she honored Mr. Jack Warner, the man who had rejected her. Captain Von Trapp wasn't simple to cast either. Christopher Plummer said no multiple times. He believed the character was uninteresting and lifeless. He even wrote a letter to the writers requesting modifications, more emotion, better conversation, and a specific song expressing his feelings for Maria. Director Wise attempted various stars, including Sean Connery, Richard Burton, and Bing Crosby, but nothing seemed right. Devastating financial struggles. Finally, Wise traveled to London and persuaded Plummer to participate with the condition that he could change the role. Even then, Plummer despised the project. He referred to it as the sound of mucus. He drank for much of the shoot. He then acknowledged being inebriated during the family's final performance piece. Julie Andrews' $225,000 pay is today regarded as one of Hollywood's worst miscalculations. The picture grossed nearly $286 million worldwide, yet she received no more compensation. Fox had been desperate. Cleopatra had nearly bankrupted the company, spending $15 million to produce. They had to sell their backlot and property. Even the chairman was sacked, but The Sound of Music brought them back from the edge. Despite this, their biggest star, Julie Andrews, was the one who received the lowest compensation. Not everybody made the cut. Mia Farrow auditioned 3 times for the role of Liesel. She was 20 years old. The director's remarks were frank, pleasant, and gentle, but lacked intensity. He also didn't believe she could dance. Ironically, Charmian Carr, who got the part, was 21 years older than Farrow. But she provided the spark they needed. Farrow's rejection put an end to her musical career, but it also led to Rosemary's Baby. Other candidates were Kurt Russell, Hattie Duke, and Terry Garr. However, Nicholas Hammond, at the age of 15, was cast as the first live-action Spider-Man in 1977. The other Von Trapp children were carefully picked after lengthy auditions, and their closeness was genuine. Even decades later, they rejoined often. Plummer and Andrews remained in touch with them throughout their lives. It's difficult to see anything ever surpassing Gone with the Wind. For 27 years, it remained at the top of the box office, surviving wars, the golden age of Hollywood, and the television era. Then came The Sound of Music. In November 1966, barely 18 months after its publication, it accomplished the unfathomable. It dethroned Gone with the Wind at the box office, grossing $286 million. That figure was also not modern-day inflated money. It was changed to match the ticket pricing of the time, making the feat even more significant. People weren't just paying extra, they were turning out in droves. Musicals had never looked so strong, and it wasn't just for the money. That picture sold 283 million tickets throughout the world. That amounted to approximately 1 out of every 12 persons alive at the time. People who didn't even know English were singing along. Audiences across Europe, Asia, and Africa fell in love with the same music and stories. There was no social media, no worldwide advertising, and no streaming. Just word of mouth and repeated viewings. That is how it occurred. The picture expanded beyond just amusement. It became a global phenomenon, a cultural boom. Everyone appeared to recognize the songs even if they didn't comprehend the lyrics. It felt like a shared heartbeat. Then came the Oscars. 5 victories: Best Picture Director, Sound Editing, and Score. In a year filled with serious dramas such as Dr. Zhivago, the feel-good musical, grabbed the show. Director Robert Wise, who had already won for West Side Story, demonstrated his mastery of the genre. The prizes honored not just the plot, but also how it was developed. Each technological component functioned in tandem. The sound, timing, music, and editing all stood out. And in an era when musicals were meant to be only for entertainment, The Sound of Music persuaded reviewers that it was art. But what viewers didn't see and weren't supposed to know was the pandemonium that lay behind one of the film's most beautiful moments. Everything seemed to be going well at the gazebo when Maria and the captain finally confessed their love. Soft lighting, gentle language, and a wonderful kiss. However, the set was really noisy. Loud, wet, and absurd sounds. It originated from the carbon arc lamps. These gigantic devices were employed to provide the moonlight effect. They were designed to give the area a dreamy, shimmering quality. Instead, they made it resemble a raspberry. A long, unwieldy, flatulent raspberry. The lights moaned with each kiss between Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer. And not just once or twice. Over and over. The timing could not have been worse. Right in the middle of the most passionate lyrics, the lights would make another harsh sound. Plummer would tell Maria, "I love you." Then came the raspberries. They tried again and again. 20 times. 20 unsuccessful attempts. Julie Andrews stated that they were standing nose to nose, trying to hold it together. But every time the music hit, they burst out laughing. It turned into a loop. The more they attempted to seem serious, the harder they laughed. The technical staff merely stood there watching the hours pass by while the actors laughed helplessly like schoolchildren. Finally, Robert Wise gave up. He altered everything. He abandoned the sophisticated lighting and instructed the team to shoot it in silhouette. This manner, the faces and laughing could remain hidden. They positioned Andrews and Plummer against the gazebo's blazing windows. The setting became gentle, dreamy, and mysterious. Most significantly, the raspberry sounds were gone. What began as a tragedy evolved into one of the most memorable romance sequences in film history. Nobody realized it was created from turmoil. Of course, the studio did not want anyone to find out. 20th Century Fox tightened down tightly. No one was supposed to discuss the raspberries, the missed takes, or the laughs. Everything needed to remain fantastic. Interviews were scripted. Behind-the-scenes discussion was prohibited. For decades, fans assumed the sequence went off without a hitch. The reality was not revealed until long later when Andrews began repeating his story on talk programs. It's difficult to be nose-to-nose in a love scene with these nasty raspberries flying at you. Struggles on set. Meanwhile, Christopher Plummer was incensed. He despised the film, calling it mushy and nicknaming it The Sound of Mucus. He thought everything was beneath him. The terrible lighting and continuous delays only reaffirmed what he already knew. He said very little at the moment. He remained professional, but within he was furious. The romantic scenario became a comedy. To make matters worse, he gained weight during filming due to excessive eating and drinking. Salzburg had become his personal jail of emotion. Nonetheless, he showed up. He performed his lines even while he was inebriated, as he subsequently revealed during certain scenes in the film. He may have despised every second, but he never deviated from character. Years later, he stated it was the most difficult part he had ever portrayed. Not because it was profound or difficult, but because he had to pretend he cared. And yet, by pretending, he contributed to the creation of something that people would remember for the rest of their lives. Another heartbreaking moment occurred during the music festival scene when Captain Von Trapp sang Edelweiss with tears in his eyes. It seemed emotional, but Plummer was very inebriated. He subsequently stated in a DVD commentary and again in his 2008 biography that he was completely inebriated when filming. He'd been drinking extensively, describing himself as a spoiled, arrogant young bastard. Nonetheless, the sequence evolved into one of the most moving in the film. The audience recognized genuineness. They didn't realize Plummer could hardly stand up straight. His opinion about this picture never changed during production. He referred to it as the sound of mucus, sometimes just S&M. He disliked how heartfelt it was. In interviews, he ridiculed it. He jokingly remarked that portraying Captain Von Trapp was like flogging a dead horse, and that he attempted to inject even a sliver of comedy into the sticky mess. For years, he couldn't speak the film's title without rolling his eyes. However, decades later, Plummer claimed that the picture ultimately captivated him. It took some time, but he ultimately felt strangely proud to have been a part of it. Then came the dubbing dispute. Most fans are unaware that when Captain Von Trapp sings, it is frequently not Plummer's voice at all. His entrances and departures were authentic, but the longer notes were performed by Bill Lee, a professional vocalist who worked for Disney. Plummer was irritated by the choice, believing it took away part of his performance. However, no one in this crowd noticed. Lee blended so nicely that most people still assume they're hearing Plummer sing Edelweiss. The grown-ups were not the only ones that suffered on set. Kim Carath, who portrayed Little Gretel, nearly drowned in the rowing scene when she was 5 years old. Julie Andrews learned of the child's inability to swim just moments before filming. What's their plan? Andrews was meant to catch her right after the boat flipped. But as the boat capsized more forcefully than predicted, Andrews landed the opposite way. Kim fell under twice before another actor jumped in and saved her. She vomited after ingesting water, which caused her to acquire a lifelong dread of swimming. Even Andrews was not spared. Everyone recalls the dramatic opening sequence where she spins in the meadow. It was horrible to film. A helicopter flew slightly over her, carrying a cameraman attached to the side. The wind repeatedly smacked Andrews against the ground as it passed. She was knocked down 6 or 7 times and ate dirt and grass every time. She continued to grin and sing inwardly, preparing herself for the next hit. It appeared magical, yet felt like an attack. Hair catastrophes exacerbated the craziness. Daniel Trujillo, who portrayed Rolf, had his hair bleached so forcefully that it never returned to its original state. He was just 20, but the harm was irreversible. His hair receded and never recovered to normal. Years later, fans would approach him and wonder why his hair was dark. He'd have to explain that his blonde Nazi-era appearance came at a significant cost. Julie Andrews also had a hair disaster. Producers worried the back of her head was too black on video. They sent her for highlights. Something went wrong, and now she has bright orange hair. The group panicked. They cut her hair even shorter and colored it blonde to conceal the damage. Andrews subsequently quipped that her platinum blonde hairstyle made her feel more Austrian. But at the time, it was a disaster. Everyone was shocked. The weather did not help either. According to Nicholas Hammond, who portrayed Friedrich, this was the worst spring Salzburg had experienced in 50 years. Rain rained nearly every day. Crew members employed large arc lights to simulate sunshine in those pleasant situations. It got so terrible that children's growth spurts began to cause continuity issues. During the extended production, one actor lost all of her baby teeth and had to wear false ones. Hammond's height increased from 5'3" to over 6 feet. He had to go barefoot in several sequences to match his co-star's height. What was intended to be a bright musical turned into a chilly, muddy marathon. At first look, The Sound of Music appears to be a pleasant classic. But underneath the singing, children, and magnificent countryside lurks one of Hollywood's most deceptive tales. A deceptive film and its impact on Austrian culture. Critics have lambasted the film for portraying Nazis as cartoon villains. It hardly touches on the true tragedy of what was happening at the time. Jewish people were being removed from cultural life. Famous conductors, including Otto Klemperer and Bruno Walter, were forced to depart. Music by Jewish composers was prohibited. The Nazis even established the Jüdische Kulturbund, a segregated Jewish cultural organization with 180,000 members in just 5 years. However, the picture avoids all of this. It romanticizes Austria while ignoring the slaughter, which was already well started. Then there's the breathtaking mountain escape scene. In the film, the Von Trapps trek across the Alps to find freedom in Switzerland. It's tense heroic, and it never occurred. In reality, the family took a train. They strolled peacefully to the station, boarded, and departed for Italy. From there, They traveled to Switzerland, France, and London. No mountaintop chases or hidden pathways. In truth, Salzburg is more than 200 miles from the Swiss border. And the mountains shown in the film, they were literally directly next to Hitler's personal hideaway, the Eagle's Nest. The Von Trapps carried Italian passports since Georg was born in Dalmatia, which Italy had seized. So they departed Austria legitimately. The film's version is pure fabrication designed to generate fictitious peril and grandeur. The love tale between Maria and Captain Von Trapp is just as deceptive. In actual life, Maria married him for his children. She said it herself, "I liked him, but didn't love him." She consented to marry him only after he requested her to stay and be a mother to the children. They married in 1927, not on the brink of the Nazi takeover as the film portrays. Maria was 22 and Georg was 47. That's a 25-year age difference. She stated that she came to love him later, but their marriage began as a practical decision. The film transformed it into a fairy tale, feeding people a falsehood about love and portraying that their relationship was all passion and romance. Even the children's narrative was altered. The genuine Von Trapps had 10 children. The movie only shows 7. Agatha Whitehead Georg's first wife gave birth to 7 children: Rupert, Agatha, Marie Franziska, Werner, Hedwig, Johanna, and Martina. Georg and Maria had 3 additional children: Rosemary Eleanor and Johannes. The producers not only removed 3 genuine kids, but also altered their names, ages, and personalities. For example, Agatha transformed into Liesel, a confident adolescent who flirts with a male. However, the real Agatha was shy and somber. When her relatives watched her on TV, they couldn't stop giggling. These alterations were not accidental. They were done to make the plot clearer, simpler, and more marketable. Hollywood did not care about the truth. The falsehoods did not end with the characters. A hidden story behind The Sound of Music. One of the most touching and memorable songs from The Sound of Music, Edelweiss, has captivated millions of viewers around the world. Its gentle melody and heartfelt lyrics gave it the aura of a beloved national treasure, so much so that many people believed it to be an authentic Austrian folk song passed down through generations. Even former U.S. President Ronald Reagan once quoted the song at a formal state dinner in 1984, further fueling its reputation as a piece of Austrian cultural heritage. However, despite its traditional-sounding melody and lyrics, Edelweiss is not a folk song at all. It was written in 1959 by American composer Richard Rodgers and lyricist Oscar Hammerstein II specifically for the Broadway stage production of The Sound of Music. The song was intended to represent Captain Von Trapp's emotional farewell to his homeland, a symbolic moment created for the narrative. It was also the last song Oscar Hammerstein ever wrote before his passing, making it especially poignant for fans of musical theater. What's truly fascinating is how convincingly the song blended into the cultural backdrop of the story. Over time, many began to mistake Edelweiss for Austria's unofficial national anthem, a testament to the power of storytelling and the influence of Hollywood on global perceptions of history and culture. But not everyone was swept away by the romanticism of the film. Back in Austria, particularly in the city of Salzburg, where much of the movie was filmed, locals had a far more complicated relationship with the production. One of the most notable examples of local resistance came from the Salzburg Marionette Theater, a prestigious institution that had been in operation since 1913. The filmmakers approached the theater hoping to use their unique handcrafted puppets for the Lonely Goatherd musical number. However, the theater declined. Their response was polite but firm. This was a respected institution with a long artistic legacy, and they did not want their work to be featured in a mainstream entertainment film that they felt didn't align with their standards. At the time, there was a perception among some Austrians that the film overly simplified their country's history and culture, reducing it to a picturesque backdrop for a stylized, sentimental story. Interestingly, despite initially declining to participate in the movie, the Salzburg Marionette Theater eventually created their own puppet version of The Sound of Music years later, an adaptation aimed at tourists who continued to flock to Salzburg because of the film's enduring popularity. This unexpected twist speaks volumes about how the story's global appeal ultimately reshaped cultural and economic life in the region, even among those who were originally skeptical of it. Beyond artistic disagreements, there was also political discomfort among many Austrians regarding the historical portrayal in the film. The Sound of Music suggests a clear-cut narrative: Austria as a peaceful, innocent country victimized by Nazi Germany. In the film, the Von Trapp family is shown as bravely resisting the Nazi regime, choosing to flee rather than compromise their principles. While this story served the emotional arc of the film and highlighted themes of integrity and resistance, it also left out the more complex and difficult aspects of Austria's real history during the 1930s. Between 1934 and 1938, before the annexation by Germany, Austria was under the control of its own authoritarian regime, one that was anti-Nazi but still undemocratic. That government suppressed political dissent, including jailing Austrian Nazis while also dismantling democratic institutions. The movie omits these details, presenting a more idealized version of events, one that some Austrians felt was a distortion of their national experience. Actor Nicholas Hammond, who played Friedrich von Trapp in the film, later reflected on the atmosphere in Salzburg during filming. He recalled that many locals were distant and unwelcoming. In his words, the town didn't want us there, and there was very little cooperation from the local community. Some residents felt as though their personal and national history had been reshaped into a fairy tale, one that left out key truths. Even Maria von Trapp herself, the woman whose life inspired the story, was surprisingly sidelined in the making of the film that bore her name. Maria had written a memoir in 1949 titled The Story of the Trapp Family Singers, which became the basis for several German-language films in the 1950s. However, when she sold the rights to German producers, she did so without realizing that she would later have no say in any Hollywood adaptation and would not receive financial compensation from its extraordinary international success. When The Sound of Music was made into an American film in 1965, Maria von Trapp had little involvement. Although she was consulted in a very limited way, her input was not taken seriously during the production process. Most poignantly, she wasn't even invited to the movie's premiere. When she inquired about attending, she was told there were no seats available, a response that must have been deeply disheartening considering the film was a dramatized version of her own life story. In the decades that followed, The Sound of Music became a global phenomenon, earning hundreds of millions at the box office and becoming a beloved classic for generations. Yet behind its unforgettable songs and uplifting message lies a layered and sometimes uncomfortable story about who gets to tell history, what is remembered, and what is left out. Julie Andrews' revelation. Julie Andrews looked flawless on film, but behind the scenes she was everything but relaxed. During The Sound of Music, she rose to prominence for a surprising reason: becoming a perfectionist. And not simply in the sense that most performers strive to get their lines correct. Julie was focused on ensuring that the picture did not evolve into a sugary fairy tale. She was concerned that the combination of stunning mountains, 7 adorable children, and catchy music could easily become too sweet, too artificial, or too much. She often questioned the director and co-star, Christopher Plummer, "How do we make this real? How should we reduce the syrup?" Julie didn't behave like a beginner after the popularity of Mary Poppins in 1964. She held opinions, strong ones. She wanted Maria's relationship with Captain Von Trapp to be grounded, not only charming. She did not want the audience to roll their eyes. Her meticulous attention to detail influenced how situations were written, shot, and presented. It was not about ego. It was all about control. Her intuition would subsequently prove to be correct. But while Julie was fighting sugar, the studio was fighting something far more dangerous: money. The budget was expected to be $8.2 million. That was already high, but it quickly started to slide. Then it started crashing. Why Salzburg? The city was magnificent, but no one informed the studio that it poured incessantly. In fact, 1964 was among the wettest years on record. Director Robert Wise expected it would take 6 weeks to shoot on location. It ended up taking 11. This meant more hotel rooms, more food, increased pay, more of everything. The group of almost 250 workers sat about for days doing nothing, just waiting for the clouds to dissipate. Camera equipment got drenched. People were freezing, and the expenditures mounted up. Box had already suffered a battering from the film Cleopatra, which nearly wrecked them. Now this. Executives panicked. Whispers spread across the studio. What if this joyful family film ended up ruining the corporation for good? And that wasn't the only covert drama unfolding behind the scenes. Long before Robert Wise was appointed the great director, William Wyler was expected to lead The Sound of Music. To prevent a conflict of interest, he resigned from Fox's board of directors in early 1963. That's how serious it seemed. But Wyler had reservations from the outset. He didn't enjoy the theatrical musical. He did not feel connected to the script. Even when he went to New York to watch the Broadway production, he departed perplexed. The music did not seem natural to him. They just didn't fit the story, he explained. There was something else. Wyler was losing his hearing. It made directing a musical much more challenging. His wife saw it plainly. He simply wasn't into it. So Wyler began silently seeking an exit. He needed a complete break, something that won't arouse suspicions. That's when producers approached him about The Collector based on John Fowles's novel. Wyler read the screenplay and immediately realized it was more his style, dark, twisted, and psychological. He petitioned the Zanuck family who ran the studio to free him from his Sound of Music contract. What's the official story? Scheduling conflicts. This is what the press was informed about. That is what Fox reiterated. However, Wyler really ran the other direction. This left the door wide open for Robert Wise, who arrived in late 1963 to pick up the pieces. What's your favorite memory from The Sound of Music? Or had you ever heard rumors about this hidden scene before? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. If you love classic cinema and stories like this, please like the video. And don't forget to subscribe to Expedition Rewind channel for more unseen Hollywood stories, legacy interviews, and emotional reveals. The hills are still alive, and so is the truth behind the music.